in a previous session, we created the landing page for our wines website, and then in this particular tutorial, we are going to make this website responsive, in that when we minimize our screen or when a viewer is viewing our website on a smaller screen, the contents of the web page shouldn't be bumping into each other, as we can see on the screen. For that matter, there is need for us to create a very responsive website to prevent this from happening, as we can see on our screens. So without much talking, we can get into the coding aspect of this particular tutorial. This time around, we won't need a lot of our HTML. We are not going to do anything with our HTML. We are already done with whatever we want to do with the contents. Only that if you want to edit your footer, the footer section, you can do that. I didn't do that in the earlier video because of time, but you can make this session very nice, or you can add other contents to this footer section as we have over here. You can change these into different things or different links. So we are going to start with a media query. We are going to set the maximum width for this display, such that when the viewer screen meets that maximum width, then this code that we are going to write would be applied to the screen. So we'll first start by saying at media screen, and then the max width should be 1024 pixels. So this one is going to be for our tablets or the tablet view. So let's see how big this 1024 pixel would look like. So let me change the body, the color of the body to red, and let's see. All right, the background color should be red. Okay, we have an error here. This one is supposed to be screen, media screen. All right, so when our screen is this big, what we are going to have, or the following codes would be applied to the web page. So when the screen is bigger than that, we go back to the earlier settings or the earlier codes that we gave our CSS. So anytime the screen is of this size, the following codes that we are about to write would be applied to our display. So we can continue and then code, but be mindful that I have set some parameters for this particular screen size. The parameters for this will span from here to here. So anything in between this would be applied to our screen if the screen is of this size or lesser. So if the screen is lesser than this, or even of this size, whatsoever we are going to specify in our CSS would apply to our screen. So now I can take this off, and then I can write a comment over here, and then I'll say this display is for tablets or medium screen. So let's say tablet media query. This tablet media queries, and then we use those comments in our codes to add some descriptions to particular codes. The role this comment plays is that the compiler ignores these comments without executing them in our main code. You can put your description in between the slash and then the asterisk. So now the first thing we are going to do is let's set the font sizes. So over here I'm going to set the H2 to 1.4 rem. 1.4 rem. Let me copy this and then paste over here. Let me do this 2 more times. So now let me set our H3s to 1 rem, then our H2s should be 0.8 rem, and our P tag should be 0.9 rem as well. I made this 0.8, let me make it 0.9. So we can see the changes ongoing over here. We can see this one has become smaller, and this one's also has become smaller. We can proceed with the other sections of the web page. Now, what we are going to deal with in this section first and foremost is this section, which is the body top menu ULs. So we are going to deal with the UL of the body top menu. So what we are going to do is that we'll say body top, and then we are going to deal with the UL. So first of all, we are going to display this grid. We are going to set it to grid display. So we'll say display should be grid. Earlier when we were doing the other displays for computers, the previous one, we were fond of using the flex display that by default sets the items to a row direction. But this time around we'll be using another type of display, which is the grid, and then we'll see the dynamics as we move on with this. And then what we can do now is that we'll set the grid template column to 1 fr, 1 fr, 1 fr. Let me see how that is. All right, so this 1 fr, 1 fr, 1 fr means that we are going to divide this container into 3 sections, where each of this occupies 1 fraction of the whole section. So this one is having 1 fraction, this is also having another. We divide it equally and then we give 1 to each group. But this same codes can be rewritten this way. So we can just take this off and say repeat, and we want to repeat the items 3 times, where each and every one of them is having 1 fraction. So it's just the same thing, but then we have written it in a different way. I think this one gives more room for easy modification and makes the code easily read, so I prefer this. The next thing we'll do is that let's set the gap to, let's make it 1 rem and see. Okay, we have 1 rem over here. So I think this is displayed properly. So when we have it on a bigger screen, we'll have something like this, and on smaller screens, this is what we are going to have. Let's continue with more of the design. Let me open this app. All right, so the next thing we'll deal with is the anchor tags in this particular section. We are going to deal with the anchor tags, and we'll say body top menu. Sorry, let's grab the anchor tags in this. Let's set the background to none. Let's set the hover to none. So I'll copy this and then I'll paste right here, and then I'll say hover. The background should be none, and then the color of the text should also be, it should still be black. Now let's style the LIs, and then we'll say the width should be 12 rem, and then the background color should be white. Okay, now we can set the padding for that to be 0.3 rem, 0.3 rem. All right, then as usual, let's set our border radius to 1 rem. Okay, now we can set the hover just like we have in our finished project. Set that when we hover on top of these items, the color of the background should change. So let's go and see that. Let's go and check that out. Let's say body top menu ULLI, and then we'll say hover. On hover, the background color should be RGB, should be 200. Let me see, let me take this off. 200, 199, 199. Let me delete this. All right. Okay, so we have it beautifully this way. Now let me set the transition. And as I said earlier, in our next tutorial, we are going to learn about all these transitions, and then we'll move step further and set variables to things that we'll be using very often, like colors, width, sizes, and transitions and other stuff. We'll set variables for them so that we don't keep declaring them manually this way. So we can see our transition working fine properly, like the finished project. So from the finished project, I think we are done with the body top menu, so we can proceed to the banner section. So in the banner container, what we are going to do is, let's say banner container, we are going to set the padding for this particular container to 7. Let's see, let's make the padding 7 rem. All right, and I think that should be enough for the container. Now let's deal with the elements in the container. So let's say banner container, and the first thing we are going to deal with is the input. We are going to change the width size for this input. So let me deal with the inputs first. So let me say the width should be 80 view width. Okay, now we have a much wider input, and then the height, let me set the height to 2.5 rem. Okay, it has a shorter height and then a wider width. And the next thing we should do is to move on to set the gap between those two elements. So now we can find that in the form. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to say banner container, and then the form. The elements of the form should have a gap of 1 rem. Okay, that worked. And then a margin bottom of 2 rem. All right, I think that's enough for the form. Okay, so now we can move on to style our button. The button, we should say banner container button. It should have a font size of 0.9 rem, font size of 0.9 rem. So after this, we can now style our h2 over here. Let's see. The h2 is found inside this class. So let's say banner container. The featured add h2 should be of font size 1.6 rem, and then the margin bottom should be 1 rem. Yeah, okay, so I think this should be equivalent to our finished product over here. All right. Okay, so now I think we can move on to style this section up. From the finished project, we have them set this way, not this way. So let's say our wines container, let's set the display for our wine container that contains all the single wine categories. So let me come here and say wines container. Let's set the display to grid. All right, now we have the display set to grid this way. Now let's set the grid template column to 1FR. So each of the elements will take the whole space over here. They don't share the space with any element. So that's what we are going to have, just like in the finished project. And I think this should look too big on tablets. So let's set the size for the image, which is inside the single wine container. So let me say single wine, and then let's attach the wine image. Let's set the width to 6 rem, and then the height should be 6 rem. Okay, so we have it smaller than the bigger screen display size, and I think that is enough for this section. So we can proceed to this particular section as well and style this whole section up. Now what we can do is that, let's say wine glass. Let me see. All right, what we'll do first is styling the wine glass image up. Let's resize it. So wine as image. Let's set the height to 21 rem, and then the width should be 20 rem. All right, and what we are going to do is that we can possibly change the font size of this in our HTML, because we declared that in the HTML. So over here, we can possibly make this font size 1.5 rem. No, that's too small. We can make it 2 rem. All right, so I think this is fine. So the next thing we are going to do is to set the display for this section as well. So let's grab that in our wine, let me see, updates container. Yes. All right, let's see. This is it. All the single wine updates are found inside this wine updates container. So we are going to set the display for this wine updates as grid, just as we did for the earlier containers with various elements. So let me have a look at the finished project over here. Okay, so in the finished project, we have our wines update container this way. So we can move on to style that up and reduce the margin. We can see there are very little gaps in between the updates containers, the single updates containers. So let's replicate this idea in our codes as well. Let's set the gap to be 0.5 rem. All right, and then let's take a little bit of this margin off. So let's say margin should be 4 rem on the top and down, and 1 rem on the left and right. All right, so now we have it just as the finished project. Okay, I think this is fine. So with this, what else can we do? Let's style this up a little bit. So now let's grab the wine updates title, single wine updates title, the update title. Let's set the margin top to be 2 rem, and then the margin bottom should be 2 rem as well. Okay, that's great. Now let's start the H5, which is this one, the main title itself. So let me copy this and paste over here, and then let's grab the H5 and let's set the margin bottom for 0.8 rem. Let's make it 0.8 rem. All right, I think this is good. Now we can do with the anchor tags in the single wine update link. So let's say single wine updates. Now let's do with the link and then the anchor tag, which is this particular one, this anchor tag over here. Let's set the font weight to 200. Okay, let me see. All right, that's fine. Now we can come to the footer section. So let's say the footer container, the display, unlike the previous one, should be set to grade. The grade template column should be repeat to, each should have 1FR. Okay, so we have it just like our finished project. Now let's continue to do some more styling. And then the footer category should have a margin bottom of 1 rem, and then a margin top of 3 rem. Let me see. Okay, now we can style the li footer category URL li. Okay, we can give it a margin 2 rem. No, this is too big. Let's make it 0.2 rem. Okay, so our project is looking like what we have in the finished project. So we can move on to style this page app for mobile display. And then for mobile display, we would want to have something like this, unlike the previous one as well. Even though this would be much simpler than the previous one, we will still have some major differences in the footer and then the body top menu section. Let's go ahead and style that up. So we would say now you would have to pay attention to this, because since we are done with this particular display, this media screen query over here, we are going to break out of this parameter. Okay, we are going to break out of this bracket and then come down here and set a different max screen, phone media queries. So over here we'll say if the screen is, so we'll set the max width to 600 pixels. Let me see how that's going to look like. The body should have a background of red. Okay, so this is the size of our phone screens. So now every other code that we'll put in here would get executed when the screen of the user is of this size. So now let's proceed and style this app so that we don't have this error over here. Now the first thing we are going to do is to grab the body top menu items, body top menu, and then let's set, since we already set the display to grid in the media queries, that's still going to affect this one as well. So now we don't need to set the display to grid again. We can just simply set the template column, the grid template columns, to repeat itself twice. Okay, so we have it over here. Now let's give it a gap of 6.6 rem, 0.6 rem, and then let's set the margin to 0 on the top and 4 rem on the left and right. Okay, it's almost looking like the finished project. Now let's set the padding to 0.1 rem. Okay, now we can change the font sizes. Let's make it 0.8 rem. Okay, so it's smaller enough. That's good. Now let's proceed to the UL items. Let's see. Let's give it a width of 9 rem. Okay, I think the 9 rem is too small. Let me make that 10. Alright, 10 rem is fine. 10 rems. So we can now come here to our banner container. So we can see there is an error over here. We have too much space here. So now let's set the banner container. Let's give it some styling as well. Banner, and say padding should be 5 rem. Say banner container. Let's set the width for our input. So let's say the width should be 90 view width. Okay, and the height should be 2 rem. Let me see. Let me change the width to 60 view width. Okay, I think this is okay. Let's proceed to style the button app. Banner container. Let's grab the button and then let's give it a font size of 0.7 rem. Now we can grab the featured add. Let's say featured add, the H2. We can give it a font size of 1 rem. Did that happen? Let's see. Banner container. Okay, so we have that change now, just as we have in our finished project. So let's proceed to style this, or we can leave this way because it's not looking that bad. Now what we can do is let's grab this wines container over here and then let's increase the width of this. Let's make this look like what we have in our finished project. So let's grab our wines container. Let's set the margin 2 rem on top and down, 1 rem on left and right. Alright, now let's give it a gap of 0.6 rem. Gap of 0.6 rem. Okay, now we can go to the image and make it a little smaller than what we have. Alright, single wine image. Let's grab the wine image and then let's set the width to 5 rem and then the height to 5 rem as well. Okay, now I think that's enough for this particular section. So we can move on to the this section as well. Okay, so this size is enough. We can proceed and style our single wine updates container. And from the finished project, okay, we have them set to grade, and then this time around we have it as 1FR, 1FR. So let's move on and see how we can do that. So in this section, we would Now we would set the display for this wines update section, in that we are going to set the direction of this display to be columnar. So let's grab, now let's say wines update container. The display should be grade. Okay, this time around we have the display as grade, and then the margin should be 3 rem top and down and 4 rem on the left and right. Okay, the gap between them should be, let me say, 1.5 rem. All right, that's fair enough. That's fair enough. Now let's grab the anchor tags, and let me see. Now we can grab the single wine update title. So margin top 1 rem, and then margin bottom should be 1 rem as well. Now let me grab the anchor tag in the link. Let's say single wine update link. The anchor tag should have a font weight of 100. Okay, so I think that would do. And finally, let's style the footer section up. And in the footer section, we'll say the display should be grade this time, footer container. The display should be grade. And then the grade template, should be grade template column. The grade template columns should be 1FR. So I think this is good. Let me see the final project. All right, okay, we can close the gaps over here for this ones. So first of all, let's say footer, we have something here. Okay, now we can deal with the footer categories, and then we'll say the margin bottom should be 0.5 rem, and then the margin top 0.5 rem as well. Okay, now the links, footer category links. Okay, we don't have that. Footer category links should have a margin top of minus 1.4 rem. Okay, that's good. Now let's set the footer category URL. The margin should be 0.2 rem. All right, so I think this is almost looking like a finished project. Let's see what's wrong here. Margin top, let me make this 1.5. Okay, so 1.5 is okay, that's fine. So as you can see in this project, we've created our blog page, and now we've made it responsive so that we can now view this blog page on phones without the display crashing in like we did in the previous video. Now everything looks perfect. We can as well view this on tablets, and then we won't have the elements or contents of our page crashing into each other. Everything looks beautiful. So if you follow through to this point, congratulations, you've done well. Hopefully I'll post more videos like this.